Amazing.
Right.
So Shia, we should be getting everyone through at the moment.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Great.
Just testing sound and everything is okay as well, isn't it?
Yep, I can hear you, Shiv.
Yeah,
Great. If everybody can mute themselves, please, if that's fine. And great. So welcome to today's webinar. My name is Ashir. I'm one of the managers with MedicMind. We've got Shivam here, our head of teaching. He's taught many students with us over the last few years from Dubai, from India, from several other countries, as well as the UK. He's our head of teaching, and we'll be hosting a webinar for an introduction for you guys today to just sort of tell you how to prepare for interviews, what to look out for, and just to give some basic tips and advice. Yes, so I think we're just gonna have to get everybody to mute themselves for now, Shiv, if that's fine. So there we go.
Yeah.
I'll hand it over to you, Shiv. I think we've got quite a few people joining, so we've got about 300 of you. So there will be a chance for Q&A at the end. If you can visit this website, menti.com, and use this code to join, that'd be great. And also regarding the webinar, it's being recorded. It will also be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so all of you can go back and access the recording later on. But yes, I'll hand over to you, Shiv.
Cheers, thanks for that, Ashir. So yeah, hi everyone, my name's Shivam, so I'm the head of teaching at MedicMind. I'm a final year medical student, and really the whole idea of today is for you guys to make use of this session. I'm going to talk about some really key points in terms of what to expect at the MMI, why do they even have MMIs in the first place? And again, I just want everyone to have a piece of paper in front of you, and the whole point of this session is you should be able to list 3 or 5 key take-home points. If you can't do that, then you've wasted your time. You've wasted my time almost as well. It's a complete waste of time for everyone. So just make sure that you have 5 points. Get that piece of paper in front of you and take 5 points away from this. And I want everyone to just feel a bit more confident about what the MMIs and what the interviews are about. And another key point is just try and interact. I'm going to have a few questions. This is a really good opportunity to really just have a go. So I'll ask people to put their hands up, and I'll just select people when's necessary. But I think before we start, I just want everyone to have a look at this picture on the left-hand side. And I chose it for a particular reason because I think it's such a good metaphor for applying to medical school. Now, anyone can put their hand up. You can write it in the chat. What is it about this picture that is so amazing, and how it links with each one of you right now in terms of applying to study medicine? Again, you can put your hand up, put it in the chat, write anything. Yeah. So yeah, there's just, it's hurdle after hurdle. It seems absolutely endless, doesn't it? It's a relentless process applying to medical school. Well, why is that? Well, the government pay about £200,000 for each student to go through the whole medical school process. It's a huge investment for the country. It's a huge thing, and that's why they make it so vigorous. It is the most popular course in the UK. And it's something that lots of people, not only in the UK, want to study, but think about the millions of people across the world that want to study medicine. You can see why it's so competitive. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It is hurdle after hurdle, and the bit that I want to stress about this though is the final hurdle is the interview. That interview is imperative, because the reason why the interview is so important is you could have 100 GCSEs, you could have 7 A stars at A levels, for example, but when you get to the interview stage, every single one of you is at the exact same level. You are at the same playing level, really, and it's all about how you perform on the interview day, and that's why it's so important. So you can have a fantastic UCAT score, you can have fantastic A-level predicted grades, but if you don't have or don't perform on the interview, you don't get the offer. It's very, very simple. So that's why today is so important for everyone, just to pay attention and just to really start thinking about how you can start preparing for the interview. So again, yeah, many of you who don't know who MedicMind are, and we're a company that help students get into medical school, dental school. We help with the UCAT, BMAT. And I mean, the statistic just speak for itself, to be honest. The students that book our kind of average number of tutoring hours with us, the percentage is about 93% in terms of them gaining a medical school offer. So I mean, I don't really need to go into the details. You can look at the reviews and things like that. I think the statistics kind of speak for themselves. again, if you want to join the Menti, I would recommend, just because you can kind of type on your phone and answer some questions on there. The Menti will just be at the top throughout the whole of the presentation. It's just there, www.menti.com, and that's the code. Okay, so again, just very, very briefly, again, you can write it in the chat. You can do it on Menti. It's completely up to you. So how do you actually feel about the upcoming interviews? What is it? What is it that you're actually feeling in terms of preparation? And it's a nice way to actually just do a bit of reflection here. This is a difficult time for all of you. You've got exams, mock exams coming up. So there's a few things, you know, I think the big thing is kind of the nervousness. The worry. Now, how can we overcome that nervousness? How can we overcome that? Well, that comes with preparation. It's very, very simple. If I said to all of you that tomorrow you're going to be sitting your A-level exams, that would make me nervous. That would hopefully make you very, very scared. And it's exactly the same with the interview. You know, you have got preparation time. You have time to prepare. And if you don't prepare, you're almost kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And that is our way of overcoming that nervousness, overcoming that kind of scared feeling that you have. My biggest tip for the interview is you have to enjoy it. You have to go into this with such a positive attitude that actually you want to show off. You want to show off to them why you would be such a good medical student at this university. What have you got to offer them? What have you got to show them? And actually, rather than making it a nervous interview, it should actually be such an enjoyable interview, as weird as it sounds. The interviews that, for example, Ashir has done and that I have done in the past, the ones that were particularly successful were the ones where we just absolutely enjoyed it, and we went into it smiling. We almost like we've got nothing to lose at all. So I think a big thing to take home from today is how are you going to change that mindset? How are you going to change the way that you look at the interviews? Are you going to look at it in a positive way or a nerving, anxious way? So in terms of the MMIs, why on earth did medical schools use the MMI? Can anyone answer that question? So anyone in the chat, just kind of just tell me a bit about why do they use MMIs, or what are MMIs?
I think this question is something a lot of people don't know about, so which is why we've actually asked. But if you guys can post in the chat, please, what you guys think really is the difference between the two. That'd be really interesting to know.
I think the general theme, Ashir, so far is there's a combination of a few things. It's about testing different skills. That seems to be the big point. MMI stands for multiple mini interviews. So it's an opportunity for lots of different people to assess you. It's an opportunity for you to show them the range of skills that you have. Because at the end of the day, doctors aren't just good at one skill. They're good at communication, teamwork, problem solving. They're good at identifying problems. They have good manual dexterity. So actually, it's a fair way of assessing people. And a lot of people in the chat have also mentioned that word OSCE. Does anyone know what an OSCE is? So that's OSCE. An OSCE. A few people have mentioned it in the chat. So yeah, you're absolutely right. They're the practical exams. So the reason why MMIs are used by basically every single medical school is because when you get to medical school, the way that you are assessed every single year is through something called OSCEs. And I've got it on the next slide here. So OSCEs are if I can get to the next slide. So OSCEs are a way of basically testing people's practical skills. And it's a way of actually let me talk about the name to begin with. So OSCE stands for Objective Structured Clinical Examination. So objective meaning that everyone gets the same chance. So everyone gets the kind of same, not exactly the same question, but it will be the same kind of system. So for example, here it says station 1 is cardiovascular exam. Everyone might have a different kind of diagnosis, but it's pretty much kind of objective in that sense. And again, it's structured because it's testing different skills. So every single year at medical school, you'll be examined using OSCEs, and you can now understand why MMIs are so important, because actually this is like a pre-OSCE. It's a way of actually testing to see, would you cope at medical school when we actually throw the OSCEs to you? And I can go through this very quickly. You know, here we have station 1, the cardiovascular examination. So I would go into the OSCE and I would say, hello, my name is Shivam. I'm a final year medical student. Do you mind just confirming your name and date of birth for me, please? And then I would begin by saying, you know, I'm just going to actually look at you from the end of the bed. And the patient might have very large legs. They might have a lots of swelling. They might be quite breathless. And immediately I'm saying to myself, well, this patient looks like they might have heart failure. So before I've even spoken to the patient, I'm having a quick look, I'm having a quick assessment, and then I'll examine the patient and ask them a few questions. I might ask them, how long have you had this breathlessness for? When does it come on? And that really is exactly what the OSCEs are testing you. They're testing that kind of holistic approach. How do you talk to patients? How can you look at things from the end of the bed? How are you going to examine them? So obviously, I'm going to have to whip my stethoscope out and listen to their chest and have a tap on their chest as well and see, actually, does this sound like they've got heart failure? Does it sound like they've got lots of kind of water building up in their body as well? So I hope that makes sense in terms of why medical schools use the MMIs. Well, again, it's how medical schools assess you, and you don't just have written exams; you have practical exams. And again, what makes medical school so unique? Just the fact that you are assessed in so many different ways, and that's what makes it so different to studying English or history or chemistry, in the sense that you are being tested on these practical skills on a day-to-day basis, really, when you meet patients. So you can imagine straight away, even in the first year of medical school, you're learning these skills, and that's what makes medicine and dentistry so unique. So again, what are the MMIs all about? What are they trying to test you? Well, I would definitely say that these are really the six that are going to be predominantly coming up in the MMI. So these include things like motivation for medicine, your work experience. Can you talk about not just work experience in terms of charity helping? What have you done at school? What extracurricular activities have you done at school? Can you talk about them? And the big word that I need every single one of you to take home today is the big R word. What is that word that I'm looking for? It begins with R, and it's to do. Yeah, there we go. Lovely, Georgina. Well done. Oh, there's loads of you. Reflection. It's if there's one word that I would say summarizes the MMI, it's can you reflect? Can you reflect on what you've done in the past, and can you use that in the future? And can you show the medical school that actually, you know, I've done all these brilliant things in the past and I've learnt so many skills, but that's not the end. If anything, that's just the beginning. This is just the start. This is what I can offer you as a medical student at your university. And actually, I want to learn this. I want to learn how I can actually still improve my communication skills. Yes, I've done lots of public speaking as a prefect at my school, but actually I want to take this one step further. I want to start teaching future medical students. I want to work in groups and do, like, for example, a lot of medical schools are involving PBL, so that's problem-based learning, it's group learning, and it's something to stress to the interviewer. It really, really is. And that work experience and personality kind of link in with each other. Personality, what I'm talking about here is if you get a situation where you have to speak to an actor in the MMI, they might say to you, "Oh, look, I've broken my arm. I'm you know, my arm really, really hurts." So you might ask lots of questions about this broken arm, but actually, this patient might be depressed. They might actually have a mental condition. Their family friend or family member might have died last week, for example. But actually, if you don't explore these extra issues, if you don't take this, I call it the holistic approach, you're not going to get the marks. So that's testing your personality. Are you just looking at this broken arm? You know, if someone comes in a wheelchair, you know, it's very obvious to see that they've got a physical disability, but actually, have you explored other things? Have you explored their mental condition? Have they got tummy pain? Have they got something that you can't really see in front of you? And of course, the medical ethics are going to come up. So again, just drop in the chat, what are the 4 pillars? What are the 4 big pillars of medical ethics that everyone should be knowing for their interview? Yeah, so we've got autonomy. So autonomy meaning that every single person, every single adult can make decisions for themselves. They have the final say. So let's go back in time. If we go back 100, 200, 300 years ago, medicine was very, very different. If a patient came to a doctor, the doctor would say, right, this is what is going to happen. We're either going to chop your leg off, and that is it. That's final. The patient wouldn't have any say at all. But now medicine has changed so much, and we call it something called patient-centered care. Is that something important for your interview? Yes. Okay, again, that's a big take-home point. Patient-centered care. So that means that actually we make decisions with the patient, because let's say someone smokes 20 cigarettes a day. If they fundamentally don't want to quit smoking, we can give them all the advice, we can give them all the kind of equipment, we can give them the referrals, but they won't stop. They won't stop smoking. It needs to come from the patient. They need to actually think, oh, well, yeah, doctor, you're right. I have been thinking about this, and this. I do understand that smoking increases your risk of lung cancer. Yeah, you're right. And you need to make this shared conclusion. And again, that's how medicine has evolved. So if you do get a question on the evolution of medicine over time, I think that's quite an important bit to mention, how we've gone from a very doctor-centered approach to very patient-centered approach. And it's the same for dentists, absolutely. We've also got our NHS hot topics. So they include things like, well, off the top of my head, things like bed blocking. We can talk about the doctor strikes potentially happening. I think bed blocking is going to be very, very prominent this winter. Again, what does bed blocking mean? You can put your hand up, I can select you, or you can type it in the chat. If you put your hand up, I can get you to unmute yourself as well. So what does bed blocking mean? What on earth does that mean? So you've got a hospital that's running with, let's say, 500 beds. How can beds be blocked? Yes, Sai, do you want to tell me what does it mean by bed blocking? Or Zane? If you just unmute yourself.
Is it when like you've got like lots of patients that could be discharged and could go home, but they're still in the hospital? So like it's taking like beds that could be used for urgent patients.
Yeah, so why can't they go home? Why can't they go home, Zane?
They could have like social issues, like may not have anyone to look after them at home, so they may be waiting on like a nursing home or something.
So if I say to you, Zane, that these patients are medically fit, what does that mean?
It means that they've got no like urgent condition or anything, and they're ready to go and be discharged. They can like look after themselves. So
yeah. And Zane, I'm going to ask you one more question. I'm pushing you here. So what can you think of any ways that we can improve this? How can we prevent bed blocking from happening?
Maybe try and organize social care earlier, and maybe that's what I thought.
Yeah, no, and again, we can think outside the box here as well, Zane. We can think about actually when patients come into hospital, maybe we should be actually involving the family a lot more, because if we involve the family very early on, we know that actually if this patient is going to be discharged in 4 or 5 days, there's a plan in place. We've got cousins or family members that can take that patient home to their house or to some place. But you're absolutely right, and that follow-up question was a challenging question. It's getting you to think outside the box. And again, there's lots of things in the chat that are really, really nice in terms of I can just repeat what bed blocking is. So bed blocking is where patients come into hospital and they get treated. So when people come into hospital, they are unwell and they get treated and they become well again. But the problem is sometimes patients don't have a place to go. So you can imagine if there's an older person and they've lost their wife and they live by themselves at home, and now they are fit and well, but actually they can't look after themselves at home. There's no way that the hospital can just say, right, bye-bye, see you later. We can't just do that, because actually we might have treated them, but we haven't treated the main problem at hand, which is kind of social issue. So bed blocking is going to be something that is going to affect lots and lots of people. So have a think, really think about this, write it down right now actually, and have a think, maybe speak to your family about how can you come up with ways to decrease bed blocking. Should we have more beds? Should we change the way that we review our patients so that we've got a plan in place in the future? It's a very interesting problem, and it's a problem that even professors are struggling to kind of decide on. then we've obviously got this big issue of COVID, and I feel like COVID will probably come up in some shape or form in the interview. We can think about how COVID has affected the population. And actually, again, I want you to think about both sides of the story. So again, in the chat, can someone tell me, what are some of the positives that came out from COVID? So we always talk about the negatives, we talk about the bad things that happened. Again, can someone put their hand up? Maybe talk to me about, yes, Sai, do you want to tell me a bit about some of the positives that came from COVID? Or Sachin? Go on.
Sorry. Hi. So I think some of the positives are what we learned from COVID, especially in terms of the NHS. So, I mean, we learned better how to deal with a pandemic. I mean, we saw this with the swine flu, especially in like 2010, and how that benefited us in allowing us to dispose of germs with the whole idea of blowing into a tissue and disposing of it. And now from COVID, we can tell through masks and through lockdown how it allowed us to cope with the spread of the pandemic. So the way it allows us to prepare for the future for future pandemics, but also outside of pandemics. The way how we had overloaded hospital beds, especially with the lack of nurses, lack of allied healthcare, and a lack of doctors, it really showed us how to create a very efficient NHS to deal with the most patients with the least amount of employees. So it really showed us how to be efficient in terms of high demand. Also to limit spread of a very infectious disease throughout multiple departments. So the idea of needing to be very hygienic, I mean, from different departments of those that were high risk and separating them from the separate areas where COVID was being handled. And it really puts into perspective how, especially with a growing increase of major diseases with like things such as antibiotic resistance, so we have like MRSA, how we can separate them from the high risk patients that have cancer that can't defend against these kinds of diseases, and how we can protect people between departments.
Yeah, and that's a really beautiful answer, Sachin. And you know, if I was to say in terms of improvement for the answer, all I'd say is maybe just give me a conclusion there. Just give me a summary then of maybe a few words to sum up everything that you've said. And I think there we go, we've got the perfect answer. And I think that's a really nice summary, because you've talked about how we are actually more efficient. We're better at the vaccine rollout. We understand the importance of when people are ill, maybe it is very important for them to isolate themselves. But having said that, we know the importance of interaction. So we called when COVID was going about, we called it social distancing, didn't we? Now, again, some people completely disagree with that terminology, social distancing, because socially, for example, communicating with people, we should still be communicating, we should still be talking to people. So actually, I like the word physical distancing. I think that's better terminology. I don't know, maybe you agree with me. You can say in the chat, do you think physical distancing is better than calling things social distancing? Because when we say social distancing, it's almost like, well, I feel like people are becoming less interactive with people nowadays. We don't want to talk to people as much. And I think that was such a huge point that came from COVID. And actually, if just think about it, the terminology that we use in public health and what politicians use, that they can be very impactful on us. So that's why even in the interview, we need to choose our words carefully. We need to choose and tell the interviewer actually quite explicitly that, I agree with social distancing, but perhaps we could change the name. Perhaps we could call it physical distancing. Do you see what I've done here? I've told the interviewer that actually, yes, I agree with something, but perhaps it could be changed in a certain way. So I think a nice word to really take home from today is using words like perhaps to really change our approach to answering questions. Okay, so hopefully that helps. I think this next point, why do you want to study medicine or dentistry? I mean, I'll give you some points kind of personally in terms of studying medicine or dentistry. The beauty of it is it's testing all your skills on a day-to-day basis. And it's an opportunity for you to work in teams, for you to help people, obviously, on a day-to-day basis, but for you to show and display these skills all the time. So communication, teamwork, it's absolutely relentless. Medicine is not black or white. Every single individual here has different anatomy. Everyone here is different. Everyone has experienced different things in the past, and that means that medicine is never black or white. It's such a gray area, and it takes us as medics and as doctors to kind of talk to our patients, to examine our patients, and to come to a conclusion that is right for the patient and right for us, and also right for the community. So I say right for the community. Can anyone come up with that word? What's the word in terms of helping the community? I'll give you a clue. It's one of the 4 medical ethical pillars. So helping the community in general. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Justice. Okay. So we want to help our community in the wider way, and that's what justice is all about. There's some really good answers on the screen there. It's sharing skills. It really is endless learning. There's that real social aspect that you don't get with any other degree. You get to know your cohort very well as a medical student. You're with like-minded people that, you know, play sport, they play music, and that's the beauty of being a medical student. It's a very privileged position to be in. It really is. And I think that's another important thing, that you are all trying to get into medical school, dental school, and you should realize how lucky you all are, because there are millions of people across the world that want to be doctors and want to be dentists, but they just don't have the means to do it at all. So you're already in a position of great kind of privilege in that sense. So I think that's something important to take away from today is, you know, just have a sit down and realize how far you've come. You've all worked very, very hard to get to this stage. So don't forget that at all. So let's go on to this next point. So this is a medical ethical question that we have here. And I'll read it out aloud, and I'll just get some people to have some thinking time. And then I want some people to put their hand up to talk to me about what they would do in this situation. So I'll just read it out. So an 11-year-old boy, James, is diagnosed with terminal leukemia illness, and his parents have told the doctors not to tell the child the news. The boy then asks the doctor what he has. What should the doctor do in this situation? So my first tip for everyone, if you're struggling, is the 5 W's. So if anyone is struggling, I do this all the time. If I have a complete mind blank, I think about the 5 W's. So those are like kind of who, what, when, where, why, how. And if I'm struggling, I just have to think about that, and that really helps me sometimes. So if anyone is struggling, maybe use that. So if anyone can put their hand up, I know, Sai, that you're trying to speak. What I'll do is, if you just put your hand up, I'll try and unmute you. There we go. So I'll ask you to unmute. So you should be able to do it now.
Hi, thank you.
Right, go for it, Sai. Do you want to tell me what should the doctor do in this situation?
I think as law says and things like that, I think we should lie. The doctor should lie, but the lie should depend on what the patient's competency is, because we can't tell the boy an outright lie, but then, you know, their parents did say that we can't tell them the news. So I think the best answer to go for would be to say that the doctor's been instructed to not tell him, or that he's not allowed, or something, that he should just go ask his parents. Because if we do tell him a lie, then that's unethical. If we don't lie and tell them that the guy has a terminal leukemia illness, then we disobeyed the instructions of the parents, which is against the law.
Thanks for that, Sai. And I'm going to pick Dahlia. So Dahlia, I'll ask you to unmute, and I just want you to actually just give some feedback for Sai in terms of that answer. Just very quickly, is there anything that you think he did well, or anything that he could improve?
I think what he did well was the fact that he actually considered that the parents, it's their will to not tell their child, and it's important that you don't lie to them and actually go and tell the child about his diagnosis. But at the same time, I think it would be important to try to understand from the parents, why do they not want to tell the child? Maybe if they're stressed about him being upset, then they can get some help to understand how to tell him in a more of a calm way, basically, or gradually make him understand his diagnosis. But I think encouraging the parents to tell their child would be a good idea, because at the end of the day, yes, he's 11, but he also is the patient, and he needs to know about his diagnosis, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if I just choose Josephine very, very quickly to just tell me, how would you structure your answer to this question, Josephine? So how are you going about, because just before you speak, I will say that that first answer that we had, we almost kind of we jumped straight in, didn't we? The answer was like, well, no, we wouldn't tell them. But actually, how can we structure our answer to actually improve the marks that we get in the interview?
Okay, good evening. So what I'll say is that for the interview, I'll say that we should first of all assess the competency of the patient to receive the news. And then after assessing the child's competency, we should speak to the parents and try to understand why they don't want the child to know the news, to know his diagnosis. Then if we realize that the 11-year-old boy James is competent enough to know his diagnosis or to understand his prognosis, then we should speak to his parents and not necessarily try to coerce them, but try to discuss the fact that he has a good capacity of understanding his prognosis. Then after that discussion, depending on the outcome of the discussion, on whether they want him to know his prognosis or not, then the doctor should act according to that. But I feel like it's best to find out the capacity of James to understand the situation he currently finds himself in.
So we keep on mentioning that word capacity. So Josephine, how do we actually assess someone's capacity? How do we do that?
Okay, do you want me to try to explain the type of conversation that I'm going to have with James in this situation?
What I'd say, I'll make it even harder for you, Josephine. I want you to sum up what capacity is and how we assess someone's capacity in 2 sentences.
Okay, so let me just take a quick break here.
That's all right. That's all right. It's a tricky question I'm asking you.
Okay. I believe that the capacity of a patient is their ability to understand their diagnosis and not necessarily jump right into decisions concerning it, but being able to understand what's going on with them, the types of let's say the types of treatment plans that they can go through within their situation, the risks of their treatment plans, and not necessarily making decisions immediately after they hear their diagnosis or prognosis, being able to understand exactly what's going on with them and being able to process that information and give a logical response to the doctor concerning it. So I believe that's what capacity means.
Yeah, nice, Josephine. And again, I do understand that it was a tricky question in terms of being able to answer it in 2 sentences, but this is really good practice. I want everyone to start thinking about the fact that we can start shortening our answers and summarizing things in 2 sentences and 3 sentences. So if I was to answer that question that I asked you, Josephine, I would say that capacity is about identifying whether a patient can understand what we are saying, retain the information, weigh up the information, and then communicate it back. Okay, so I'll repeat that again. So it's their ability to understand the information, retain the information, weigh up the information, and then communicate it back. And if a patient can do all 4 of those things, they have got capacity. So one of the things that I would do to answer this question, okay, and this is how I would answer it in the interview, is I would say, first of all, to the interviewer, but actually this is a very tricky and sometimes might be quite an emotional situation to be in. So I'm being quite honest here. I'm just telling the interviewer early on, but actually this is a tricky situation for a doctor to be in. And I know that sounds so obvious to all of you, but you need to tell the interviewer that. You need to be very explicit and tell them that this is a tricky situation and I need to approach it with some sense of sensitivity, and I need to make sure that I'm thinking about the child, but also thinking about the parents as well. Now, one of the things that I would do is I would talk to James and actually ask him what he knows. What do you know, James, already about how you are? The fact that he is in hospital and he's got a terminal leukemia illness, he's obviously very, very ill. So can he even communicate with us? Does he even know where he is? He might think that he's at home or at school. We don't know. So these are all things that you need to tell the interviewer that you're thinking about. Now, if James is quite incoherent, if he doesn't know what's going on, then actually telling him that he has leukemia might make him worse. It might make the situation worse. He might feel even more upset, and he's already ill. Okay, so we're kind of defeating the purpose here. And so actually, do you see what I'm doing here? I'm thinking about different possibilities. If James is unwell, if James doesn't have capacity, and if he does have capacity, then what I would do is I would say to James, actually, you are unwell. And I think it would probably be better if we talk about this with your parents as a group, so that we're all kind of communicating with each other. And I think that way, then we have an opportunity to then go and talk to the parents. And actually, all of you are absolutely right. We need to speak to the parents and ask them why. Why don't they want to tell their child? Are the parents really scared? Are they really struggling? And that's something that, yes, we've got James as a problem over here, but also we need to think about the parents, because they come part of kind of the package of being with James. Okay, so does that help? I hope that helps. And I hope that, again, a big take-home point here was understanding, retaining, weighing up, and communicating back. That's how we check someone's capacity. Okay, so I hope that helps. And
I've just got one small thing to add, Shiv. I think this is something you guys need to know about, but just something you can read up about after this webinar is Gillick's competency. If you want to go a step further, because it is an 11-year-old boy, doctors and health professionals have a different set of guidelines when it comes to confidentiality for people under 18. It's a complicated subject, so we're not going to go too much into it. But think about Fraser's guidelines and Gillick competency. There are two important concepts that if you understand and you can bring up in your interviews, it will definitely help you with these situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is why it's an important issue to learn about. And if you're still struggling, I mean, to be honest, Ashir, this is kind of what we do day in, day out. I mean, Ashir and I teach on a day-to-day basis, and the whole idea of one-to-one tutoring really is to be able to answer these questions coherently with a tutor, and for them to answer the questions with you. So if anyone's still struggling, then you can just let us know. And what I'll do is, if I go on to the next slide, Ashir, again, I just want everyone to, I want to be absolutely sure that everyone understands these 4 pillars. So again, can everyone just write, in the chat or on Menti, A is, what is it? Is it autonomy? Is it beneficence, non-maleficence? So I'll give you some time to do that. Give you about 30, 60 seconds to just have a think, and just have a think to yourself, why have you made that decision? What is it about a particular word that you've chosen? What is it about a particular thing that you've spotted in that sentence that makes you sure that it's autonomy or that it's non-maleficence? Lovely. So I think it's quite apparent that A is to do with autonomy. Someone refusing a vaccine, me personally, if I was in this situation, I might think that the patient is making a quite an unwise decision, and that's probably because it's actually not just unwise for that person, but actually in the grand scheme of things, they're actually affecting other people in society. Because think about it, the way that vaccines work, I mean, if we go back to biology, is herd immunity, isn't it? We need a certain percentage of people to have vaccines for it to actually be effective. So actually, we do need to maybe advise the patient. We can advise, we can talk to them about the pros and cons of the vaccine, but at the end of the day, it's their final decision. B, in A&E, there's a polite lady with a broken arm, and then there's a rude, angry man with high blood pressure. That's what hypertension means, and a painful chest. That's quite serious. They could be potentially having a heart attack right there in A&E. So even though they're being rude and they're angry, we would need to actually, think about the community, think about the shared sense, and that's where justice comes in. A patient critically ill, unable to communicate, to give consent. The doctor decides to operate to save the patient. Again, that's beneficence. A lovely way to remember beneficence is beneficence, kind of the start of it is like benefit. So it's what we doctors do to benefit the patient. Another way of remembering it is BE, which is kind of short for best interest as well. So we've got beneficence, benefit the patient, best interest. Okay, big take home point. Hopefully everyone can remember that for the future. And D, we're left with non-maleficence. So that's non-maleficence because we don't want to harm this patient. Yes, they can have this organ transplant, but at the same time, if it's a completely different blood group, we might actually be harming them and they might actually die. Yeah, Amara, did you have a question? Sorry. No. So why should we be grateful? So again, I wanted to highlight this one final time. We are in a position where we are applying to medicine, applying to dentistry. We've got millions of people that want to be doctors and dentists. So just take that time to reflect and think that actually you've come this far, you've done very, very well. So give yourself a break, really give yourself a break in terms of, we need to stop being so hard on ourselves and criticizing absolutely everything that we do. That's where constructive criticism comes in. So when you work in pairs, when you kind of have tutoring with us at Medic Mind, it's all about kind of reflection. It's about what have you done well and what can you improve? And we look at everything kind of in that positive way. And I think that kind of brings me on. One of the things that reason why we do these talks is to give you this information. And a lot of people have messaged me in the chat to say, where are the MMI circuits? How do we get to the tutoring? So again, I'll just quickly leave this on for a couple of seconds. We have this code at the bottom for students. So it's MMI 10, and that gives you 10% from the interview live days or the MMI circuit. So maybe just make a note of that. So if anyone wants to do the MMI circuits with us, we have 20 stations that we go through. So it's quite extensive. And yeah, Ishir, was there anything else that you wanted to mention about that at all?
So Shivan, the QR code is on the page next. So if you go over, I think the students can scan that. So if you guys want to take a screenshot of this and you can book this. This day is brilliant, to be honest. There's people like Shivam, myself, who will be running it, along with some of our best tutors that have been teaching with us for several years now. They'll be able to give you a breadth of knowledge, especially the MMI circuit. If you're looking for something very comprehensive that will cover all the topics that could come up on an MMI, I'd probably go with this. It runs every Sunday. We do it from 12 till 4 p.m. It's a great opportunity for you guys to actually go ahead and do a simulated mock and get some specific feedback. We've had some brilliant feedback from students in the past about this event, and I'd probably recommend for you guys to at least look into it or try maybe doing it towards the end of your preparation. We do provide lots of video tutorials, and a lot of these webinars that we do for our students exclusively are posted in our online course, which you get for free with these packages.
And yeah, you can change the dates, and it's very, very flexible in that sense. And again, if anyone's struggling with the QR code, Ashir's just putting it in the chat as well if anyone has any questions. The reason why we put this up is we've just had hundreds and hundreds of messages over the last few days about the MMI circuits, about the live days, about the tutoring. So we just thought that we'd add it in here. And if you've got any other questions, then you can always just let us know.
And if you visit our website, we've got free interview books as well. So if you visit the link or that QR code, we have a free interview handbook or sort of an ebook that we provide for students. So you just have to put your email address down and that will be sent through to you.
So I told everyone at the beginning, I said to everyone, please make 3-5 points about what the take-home points from today are. I would like someone to raise their hand. I would like them to unmute themselves then and just tell me what has been a take-home point. What is the purpose of today? What has anyone actually got from today and learned and that they can use for the future? So yeah, just put your hand up, have a think about it. I shared a bit on the slide, so if anyone was struggling. So yeah, any ideas at all? What have been the big take-home points from today? You can write it in the chat, you can unmute yourself, that's absolutely fine. So Shir, in terms of the kind of reasons, in terms of the OSCEs that you do, for example, at medical school, how similar are they to the MMI stations that go on?
Well, one thing I'd say, Shiv, is in MMIs, you just have to be very holistic about how you answer things. OSCEs are very time pressured, and so are MMIs. So we've got a certain number of things to do within a specific amount of time. I don't know about you, Shiv, but in our med school, what we tend to do in year 3, we have OSCEs and then we have OSLers as well. So there's 2 different types. But again, with OSCEs, we get given a patient, and it's more like, you're just speaking to them and sort of diagnosing what the problem is. A lot of these times, the medical ethic ones that we kind of share, the confidentiality scenario, is something you could have, in fact, in an OSCE. What they're seeing is how you react under pressure and under time, and how you can, bring up the right points and see what your thinking is at the time. And one of the things about OSCEs is it's very sort of centered towards problem solving, and that's something you will work on as prospective medical students and someone who's in medical school as well. Something that we also do later on is examinations and OSCEs as well, which is more practically based. But for example, there's a certain format to remember, but then you have to be confident with these things as well. In an MMI, what I find is I got very nervous the first time I did them. And we all do. And that was one of the things the students brought up, that I was very nervous. I'm nervous still right now preparing for them. But the way they're going to overcome that is doing lots of practice. And we do lots of practice for OSCEs as well. So Shivam and I spend lots of time with friends and colleagues practicing before our exams to build up that confidence. That's the only way you're going to actually get that confidence to succeed at the OSCE, or your MMIs, for a matter of fact, for this one. But yeah, that's what I would recommend. Anything else you'd like to add there, Shiv?
No, I think that sums it up really well. And I think that the reason why a talk like today is just important for everyone I just want to highlight really important points. And I want to just make it clear that, if you are doing practice, if you are preparing for the interview, again, it is about reflection. It's thinking, what have you actually learned? What have you actually learned? And I think, I promise you all that I was going to write some things down in terms of take-home points from today. And hopefully this is clear, why we have to complete the MMI, what the purpose of it is, some of the topics that come up in the MMI, what the 4 pillars of medical ethics are. I talked a lot today about reflective practice, didn't I? I talked a lot about how we can sit down and have a think about what have we done well, what can we improve, how can we actually tell an interviewer that we are going to make a difference to their medical school. And a big thing from today as well was that get out of jail card is the 5 W's. Anyone struggling ever, I have mind blanks all the time, but I think about who, what, when, where, how, and that really, really helps me. So, I just wanted to take that time to really also just thank Ashir. There's a lot of preparation that goes into these talks. There's a lot of organizing that goes on as well. We've got 400, nearly 500 people today joining. So I just wanted to, if anyone can kind of just leave us a review on Trustpilot, just gives us an opportunity to kind of, if you would like to say thank you, if you found it useful, that's the main thing. I just want everyone to find things like this useful.
Hey guys, like Shivam said, we put a lot of effort into delivering these sessions for you, and Shivam puts a lot of work into reading up on the latest updates and making sure that we deliver it to the best standard. So because we put so much effort in, we would love to have some feedback, and the only way that we can continue to provide these is if we get some positive response from you guys. And if you like it and we see that you're enjoying these sessions, we will host many more for you to join. And lots of people have been asking about a recording about this session. And just to let you know, it is on our YouTube channel. So if you go ahead and subscribe to our channel, you'll see any new webinars that are coming up, and we'll email you as well. The recordings are all on our YouTube channel. You can access it there. One of the things we are doing for this webinar in particular is if you manage to leave a review, please post your email address on the chat function here, because we'll be picking out one student to do 1 hour of free one-to-one tutoring. You can do a university-specific mock, you can do sort of a mock in general, or just a 1 hour of guidance with the tutor. It can be anything. So if you leave a review, and we'll give you about a couple of minutes to do that, that's fine. So if you guys can do that, and once you've done it, just leave your email address in the Zoom chat. We'll randomly pick somebody out. So if we give the students about 5 minutes, if that's okay, just maybe 2 or 3 minutes actually, just to go ahead and leave their email address.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. And if there's any questions as well, then you can just put your hand up or something as well. I'm more than happy to answer them. Ashir is also just going to put information about the MMI circuit. So with the MMI circuits, not only when you book them, you also get access to our course, our online course. You get access to kind of additional material as well. So that's the benefit of the MMI circuit. It's not just one day. It's not just one day where you do 20 circuits. You get additional things as well. So any questions about that, then just drop it in the message. Yeah, Hafsa, did you have any questions? Sorry.
Hi, thank you guys for the webinar. It was really useful.
No worries.
Do you guys have any particular books you'd recommend for us to buy and just prepare? The course seems really amazing, but they're quite expensive. So if there's any books that you guys recommend for us, that would be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Hafsa. So the thing with the books that we found is that they're normally quite generic interview questions, and I think one of the things that I've struggled with in terms of the last few years is when we go through these books, we find that they're never really medical school specific. They're just very general. So what I would say is we have books on our website. And Ashir, is there anything else that you recommend in terms of books to go through?
So we have lots of free study material. If you search up Medic Mind UCAS guide on Google, I can't share my screen at the moment, but if you guys stick around after after the QR code is off, I'll share my screen, or Shiv will to show you. But we have lots of resources for free as well. I know the course is slightly more expensive than some of the books, but there is lots more content than a lot of the books as well. I've used the ISC medical book, a few others as well. They're very good books for starters, but there's not a clear definition of what's too much to learn and what's too little, because if you get a 200-page book, it's just reading off the book that you're relying on to build your answers, and it's very independent learning. Whereas we've made these online courses and these circuits basically to help interact with people and also learn from actual examples. Funnily enough, in 2017, I used Medic Mind's resources as well, back when I was struggling to get into medical school. What I found was the main difference is there's a university-specific element as well. And there's not a massive difference between universities, but they tend to have a specific structure. There's some topics they like asking about and some they don't like asking about. So what we've done in our course is made it specifically tailored to that. So whilst it's slightly more expensive than the books, you wouldn't need anything more if you do go for one of our online courses, I would say, because we do cover everything in a lot of detail on that. And it's a worthwhile investment, I would say. In terms of other things as well, keep up with BBC healthcare news. You can literally just search BBC and go on the news about junior doctor strikes right now, COVID-19. For example, there's talks of blackouts in December as well, how that's going to affect healthcare delivery. You can talk about, so you can look up elective surgeries as well, the COVID backlog on that. All of these things are sort of hot topics that you should be aware of. So build up some case studies as well. Other than that, we talk a lot about reflection today. And one thing I want you guys to go back and look at is something called Gibbs Reflective Cycle. So the GIBBS Reflective Cycle. It's by the University of Edinburgh, and it's a really good framework for you to build your answers for your motivation to medicine and your personality traits. So that's what I'd recommend in terms of free resources. Other books, I can't think of any at the moment that I would recommend that would completely prepare you, other than the interview course that we have at the moment. Yeah,
amazing. And I kind of want to apologize as well that we can't fit in more. We only have a limited time. So the whole idea of today was to give you that kind of introduction, that cider, and just give you some tips and tricks. Can you take away 4, 5, 6 things from today? The human mind can't remember generally more than 7 things within like an hour that they can repeat and regurgitate, later on in the day or the next day. So we wanted to just keep it kind of nice and simple and give you some take-home points. Yusuf, did you have any other questions? Sorry. Or Zain? Or Dahlia? Perfect.
Okay. Like I say, guys, if you guys, sorry, Dahlia.
Sorry. I was unable to unmute myself. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the webinar. It was actually so useful. Like, I didn't know about the MMIs that much. I just wanted to ask regarding the dental school interviews, do they have any kind of like practical assessment of like the kind of artistic skills of the applicant?
Yeah, so Dahlia, it's a really, really good question. And the straight answer to that is yes, they do. And some of them are actually quite tricky. So some of them involve having mirrors and you having to kind of maybe do some sewing or do some kind of sometimes like origami, sometimes kind of putting blocks into kind of like a square into a square block and then circle into the circle. But sometimes they have mirrors there to actually see, do you have that manual dexterity? So it is something that actually, Dahlia, for dentistry, this applies more for dentistry rather than medicine, is actually, yes, I'd recommend doing some manual dexterity, do some practice, because it seems to be coming up more and more.
Is there like a specific guide or something that we can like practice from, or is it just random manual dexterity skills?
So I'll give you a few examples, Dahlia, if that's okay, because one of the interviews I got, and this wasn't from dentistry, when I applied to medicine, I got one, they just asked me to explain to me how I would tie my shoelaces. Those are examples. There is a resource that we have on our website for this, and I'll find a link. There are a few different examples, and they can be a bit random at times. What I'd say is work on your communication skills for all of them. So the ability for you to imagine you're speaking to a 2-3-year-old, or even that's not 2-3-year-old, like a 5 or 6-year-old who really doesn't understand much at all. You have to break down complex bits of information. And with manual dexterity, you have to do the same thing as well to show people how you would do a certain activity in a very simple manner. So you can prepare sort of using different random questions. I'll post a link in the Zoom chat for you to look at if I can find it. We have a few different examples of what you can do actually for these stations. And that's also covered in our online course as well.
Okay,
yeah, I hope that helps,
much.
Dahlia.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No worries at all. Yeah, Samuel, did you have a question? Sorry, I can unmute you if need be.
Hi, I do, yes. It relates back to earlier what you mentioned in the webinar relating to hot topics for MMIs.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you could explain, or not necessarily explain, but maybe give some more hot topics that you think might appear in this year's interviews.
Yeah, it's a good question. Even my memory is not the best in the world, but what I would say is generally the best thing to do is look on websites like the BMJ. So that's the B, it literally is bmj.co.uk or .com. BBC News, for example, and that will give you a nice idea of what really is the latest things happening in the UK. One of the other things that you could do is look at global news as well. You can just type in on Google kind of like global health. And what's the latest happening in different countries. There's a lot going on in kind of Hong Kong at the moment, in Iran, in terms of like very poor healthcare provision for people. And also another thing I'd say, Samuel, is try and learn kind of the benefits and disadvantages of a private healthcare system, and why the NHS is so important for the UK, and how it's it keeps people very healthy and fit. So that's what I would say, Samuel. I think that's the main thing that I talk about, and just have a look on the news. That's what I recommend.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
If you guys want, the top 3 that I think personally are big topics for this year is, first of all, the effects of war on healthcare, because there is a sort of a big issue going on at the moment, and that might come up in global regards. And another one is sort of the blackouts we're going to face in December, potentially the energy crisis, how that would affect health as well. That's a big one. And the junior doctor contracts as well, and inflation particularly. One thing you guys need to get good at, I think, is not just being a good doctor and a good, say, a prospective medical student. It's also understand the wider implications of other social economic factors on healthcare too. If you can understand how the economy and different policies will affect healthcare. There's one thing about being a doctor is not just about treating patients, about managing your department, managing your own team as well. So you need to show a bit of initiative there and look into sort of healthcare policies that are being put in place as well in the UK government. So there's quite a bit of that, political instability and how that affects the NHS as well. Look into the structure of the NHS, how it's funded, and how for example, the CCGs works, the clinical commissioning groups. A lot of people don't understand that, but if you can understand that, you will impress the interviewer if you're ever asked about those.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Great.
Right, guys, we only have time for one more. Sorry, with time. Is there like a burning question? Sorry, that you can type in the chat from Shreya or Shrina or Josephine. If you want to quickly unmute yourself. If not, we'll just have to call it a day. Sorry. No.
I think Shreya's. Oh, so Shreya, do you want to ask a question, if that's okay?
Yeah. Thank you so much for the webinar. I just want to check, you know, like the calculation questions in the MMI stations.
Yeah.
How would you go about that?
So there's a few different types. You would have sort of infusion rates, drug dosage calculations. There's a few different ones. So what I would say is you definitely need to go back to AS level chemistry and look into sort of infusion rates. So that's one thing you can search up. Shiv, do you have any ideas of any others? I didn't really come across too many data calculations myself, but I know for dentistry and some medical schools, it does come up quite a bit more.
Yeah, I think everyone should be prepared for maths questions coming up. They won't test your A-level maths, it will be GCSE maths. What you do need to be very good at is just reviewing your times tables and quick division, and just also knowing how things work in terms of factoring. So do you know what, like, for example, milliliters are and micrograms? You know, just ensuring that you know how many thousands do you have to convert from micrograms to 1 gram, for example. So those are things that I'd recommend going through. Are they very, very tricky? No, but the problem is the pressure. It's the pressure of the exam, the pressure of the MMI that causes people to do very weird and wacky things, even though the maths are very simple. So I'd say go through your times tables, go through factoring, and try and do it in a pressured environment. So let's say you've got 10 questions to do in like 2 or 3 minutes. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, and like Shivam said, it's your mental math that's going to help you, and also the conversion rates as well. Do make sure you explain your rationale behind each question that you're asked and each of your answers. Explain how you got to the answer. It's more important you show you're working out rather than getting the correct answer for a lot of these calculation stations.
So the last bit I'd say, so first of all, Shrina, so yeah, it's medicine dentistry. So what we'll do is you just have to let us know that you are a dental student, and we a prospective dental student, and we will tailor the stations for you. So absolutely, so it's for medicine and dentistry. Josephine, in terms of being an international student, I think that means you have to look into NHS hot topics even more. So that means going on to things like BBC, finding out what is happening in the NHS at the moment and why is it on the news, basically. Yeah, that's what I'd say. The recording will be on YouTube, so don't worry about that. We do unfortunately have to stop it there. I do hope that this was useful for everyone, and if you have any questions, you can always email us. You can go to our website. Have an incredible evening. Think about some of the things that we talked about today. Speak to your family about it. What did you actually learn from today? And if you've got any questions about tutoring, about MMI stations, then again, just drop us a message on our website.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ashir, for joining as well. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, Shiv. I think you did a great job, and everybody seems to have loved the webinar. So thank you so much for joining us. And round of applause to Shivam again for the great work today. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Right.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself. And any questions about tutoring, MMI interviews, just drop us a message on our website, or you can get in contact with us. You can book it directly on my website as well if you wanted to. But yeah, take care, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.